We bring in now our friend Adam Carolla, star comedian, podcast host. Adam, we got a bunch of stuff to hit you with. Let's start here. You're out in California, crazy town. They're talking on MSNBC about bringing masks back. I remember early on in the COVID era, you got so fed up, you were just traveling around the country to do comedy events where you could go to steakhouses. I remember having a conversation with you. Are even you still stunned at the number of people still walking around in masks in the LA area?
Yeah, it's insane. I mean, at least you know how they vote. If you see a guy with a mask, you know he votes Democrat. And if you see a guy who wears his sunglasses on top of his ball cap, you know that guy votes Republican. So you don't even have to talk to people anymore. The whole masking thing, I mean, think about this concept. The first time we heard the phrase mask up in between bites on an airplane, that's the day every American should have said, this is insane, this is nonsense. Mask up in between bites.
Yeah, I think that, was actually the policy, Adam, was on airlines. People forget this. It was not a masking policy. It was a mask up in between bites policy, which was enforced with Stalinist enthusiasm by at least some members of the airline attendant community. I can speak to that personally. In California, is your expectation that as you go into the flu and cold season here, that they're going to try to pretend like that wasn't all insane? Like, are they going? They're not going to do lockdowns, obviously, but are there going to be weird signs telling people separate and 6 feet apart and all that stuff, or have they moved at least far enough away from that?
Many of those signs are still up. I was just at the Burbank airport 2 days ago, and they had all these signs up about get your kids vaccinated. It's really just a compliance issue. It's not really a safety or health issue. It's really California just basically wants everyone to comply, wants their subjects to comply, and that's all it's ever really been about. So if you think of it in those terms, then it makes sense. If you think of it from a scientific standpoint, then you get confused.
And can you weigh in on something really important for us, Adam? It's actually getting real political attention because there was a hearing on Capitol Hill. Clay and I have been going back and forth here. I'm not saying that Clay has been abducted by aliens, but he certainly leaves open the possibility that he may tell us one day, because he's a believer. Where do you come down on the UFO stuff? Last week, Capitol Hill had hearings on this. They had some guy under oath say they pulled bodies out of a UFO. I mean, did you see that? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah. Well, I like to look at it as a little more of a sociological experiment, because I'm a little older than you guys, and I remember living through the 70s, and it was nonstop UFO talk. Every third TV show was Leonard Nimoy narrates, and who really built the pyramids, and we were obsessed with UFOs all through the 70s, and now, for the first time, we seem to have real proof there were UFOs and are UFOs, and nobody cares. And the thing that's insane is if you would have got hold of me in 1977 and said, we have real hardcore proof there's UFOs, I would say the world would stop and everyone would go outside their house and look into the skies. We would cease having arguments about politics or sports or anything, and we'd all go right to UFOs. And it's because we're such insane narcissists now that we're all staring down at our phones instead of looking up in the sky. You can't even get people's imagination into this stuff. You can't get into it because we're such intense narcissists that it's not about us. It's about the heavens, and nobody cares, which is insane.
Adam Carolla, we're talking with him now. You've got a comedy camp coming up with Jay Leno. I'm curious what the vibe when you talk to your comedian friends as we get ready for 2024. They all lost their mind over Trump. Now we're going to potentially come up with 4 years of Biden, and nothing really has changed. It's not like things have gotten back to normal in the country in any way. Is there a closet, hey, we're done with this whole Democrat cancel culture, anti-comedy bit that you hear even from people who are afraid of offending, right, some of their audience that might be more liberal? What's the vibe in the comedic community as we get ready for 24? Would it be all hands on deck, everybody ridicules Trump, or do you think the comedians may just actually try to make people laugh as opposed to being political stooges?
I think, Biden being a complete S show and Trump being out of office and then, of course, them being wrong about all things COVID has kind of tempered them a little bit. It's like it's tamped them down because they have crazed egos and they think they're right about everything, but they don't possess any discernible skills. But they will ramp it back up if Trump starts getting near the White House. There's no doubt about that. Although there's another comedic community, mostly out of New York, that is a burgeoning community that has basically pushed against all the political correctness and are doing their own thing. They don't need Netflix anymore. They don't need HBO anymore. They're using YouTube to release their specials. So just like anything, it has created a sort of counterculture group, which I'm happy for.
Are you going to, or have you seen, Adam, Barbie, so that you can at least comment on it for the purposes of comedy and your work?
I spoke to my daughter and her friends. They're 17. They've seen it. They didn't really care for it. And I've talked to a few people just from a comedic standpoint, like how funny is this movie? And they didn't give it a very high mark in the comedy department. But that's all I got on Barbie.
What about Jay Leno? You see this like comedy, everybody's shut down because of the writer's strike. I saw they said that they weren't going to have a host of the ESPYs because they didn't have writers. I don't know if you saw this, and I was like, they actually had writers for the ESPYs? I didn't think it was that funny in the first place. What are you doing with Jay Leno? What are you trying to teach? What's the plan?
Well, I talked to the guy who's been running the rock and roll fantasy camp for 25 years. And it's a great success. People get to sort of live their dreams out with the rock and roll legends. And I just said to him, why not a comedy fantasy camp? Like that baseball, they have rock and roll. What about comedy? And he just said, that's a great idea. And it'll be stand-up comedians. It'll also be guys who run sitcoms, guys who write on sitcoms, guys who write on late-night shows, showrunners, show creators, all things comedy. So if you want and a peek behind the curtain, then you just go to comedyfantasycamp.com, and it's basically the same as rock and roll fantasy camp or baseball fantasy camp.
That's a super cool idea.
Yeah, comedyfantasycamp.com, everybody. Go check it out. Also check out the Adam Carolla podcast. Adam, always appreciate you hanging out with us. Thanks for calling in today.
Always a pleasure, guys. Keep up the good work.